Okay, we're up to Daf Pei Vav Amid Aleph. We're up to the large Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Shloisha Zeisimheim. There were 3 times a year when olives are harvested. Ubehen Shloisha Shmanim. Each harvest had 3 different grades. So 3 different harvests. The first harvest was the most chashiv, then second most chashiv, then third. And within each harvest, there were 3 different sort of rotations. So you're going to have 9 grades of oil. So the Mishnah explains each one. Hazayis Arishan, the first harvest was megarga beresh hazayis. They would pick the crop at the top of the olive tree. Now the higher up in the tree, the more sunlight, the better the quality. So the first harvest was the top of the tree. The top of the olive tree was the most chashiv. So the first harvest is going to be top quality from beginning to end. Now within that first harvest, this is what they would do. They would pound the olives in a mortar and put it in the basket. And it would drip out the bottom of the basket. That was the first. Rav Yehuda has a slight disagreement. He says sevivos hasal. They would not actually place it in the basket. They would place it on the side of the basket tilted, and it would drip out that way. A slightly different way of doing it. Zeh rishon. The olive oil that comes from that is the first choicest of olive oils. We'll see that was used for the menorah. Then, what they would do is after that, they would take the olives, chazav v'tayin b'kaira. They would press the olives with a beam to get more oil. Rav Yehuda disagrees. He says, ba'avanim, not with a beam, but with stones. Okay. What oil came out of the pressing with the stones or beam, zesheni. That's the second quality of the first harvest. And chazav v'tachan v'taan. Then they would grind the olives with millstones and press them further. And zeshlishi. And that's the third grade of the first harvest. The rule was harishon lemenorah. The first was used for the menorah, and hashar lemenachos, and 2 and 3 were used for the carbon mincha. So that was the first harvest. Now they would do the second harvest. It's the same process, it's just where the olives came from. The first harvest, the olives came from the top of the tree, which is the most sunlight. The second harvest was the side of the top of the tree. Says the Mishnah, Hasheni, the second olive harvest was megargara bereish hagag. They would pick it at the rooftop level. It wasn't the top of the tree, it was where the trees hit the rooftop. So it was a second madrega. Not as much sun, so not as good quality, but the exact same process. Pound it and put it in a basket. Review says the side of the basket. That all of the quote comes out first is the best of the second shift. Then go weiter, the same one. The tayin b'kaira, they would press it with beams. Review says with stones. Asheni, the oil that came out was the second of the second harvest. Chazav v'tachan v'tan. Then they would mill it further and grind it. Zeshlishi, and that's the third. Now within the second, they would take the oil. There's A, B, and C of category 2, right? Harvest 2 had A, B, and C. A was still used for the menorah. Even though it's the second harvest, which is not as good as the first harvest, they would still take the A of the second harvest was used for the menorah, and B and C of the second harvest was used for the Menachos. So AA and A1 and I don't know, I've lost the first one. The first of the first and the first of the second were used for the menorah. The remaining was used for the Menachos. That's the first 2 harvests.
The A of the second level was also used.
Correct. Correct. B1. Shlishi, the third. Now the third harvest was the least quality of the oil. They would take, this is from the lower part of the tree that never really got enough sunlight, so it never really developed properly. You would pack the olives into a vat until it's sort of, they call it spoiling, but until it basically ripens enough that it's now called oil. Then they would take it up and dry it on the top of the roof. They would pound the olives in a mortar and put them in the basket. Rav Yehuda Omer svivas hasal. Again, Rav Yehuda says the side of the basket is zarishon. Now it's the same process. Ton b'kor Rav Yehuda mervavanim zasheni. Chazav v'tachan v'tan zeshlishi. And again, harishon lemenorah v'shal menachos. And again, the first of the third harvest was still used for the menorah. Number 1 of every harvest is menorah. 2 or 3 of every harvest is the mincha. Even though the third harvest is not as good as the first or second, they would still take the first of all of the oil was used for the menorah of every single harvest. Okay. Now the Gemara has a quick shaila. Iboilu, the Mishnah said that when they would start harvesting, it would say the lashon was megargaroi. Megargaroi means to pick individual olives as they're ripening. The question is that the proper girsa? Is it megargaroi tanan or megalgaloi? Megalgaloi implies, Rashi explains, it's not individually picking olives. You wait until they're all done. So it's just a quick shaila. That first harvest, did they just they wait till all the olives at the top of the tree are good, or did they pick individual olives? Is it megargaroi or megalgaloi? So the Gemara is going to answer. It's a very long brisa, and this brisa uses the word. It's basically just a longer version of our Mishnah, and it talks about all the details of what we just said about the crushing, all that stuff. But the Mishnah, the brisa clearly uses the words megalgaloi. So that is the proper girsa. Okay. So Tashima, the Tanya, look at the brisa. The brisa says shemen zayis, olive oil in the Beis Hamikdash. Mizeisai, it would come from olives, meaning it should be that it would be without properly destroying it, meaning it should be so ripe that they're just like filled with oil. Mikan amru, and this is the process. Zayis rishon, the first olive harvest, megalgaloi, b'rosh hazayis. They would wait until the top of the tree was ready. V'koyin sele beis habad, they would bring it into an olive press. V'toichnei b'rechaim, they would grind it with millstones. V'noisnei basalin, and they would place it in baskets. Shemen hayotzi mimenu, the oil that comes from it, zeh hayarishon. Then tan mekaira, then they would place it with beams. Shemen hayotzi mimenu zasheni. Chazar v'parak, and then they would remove it again, and tachan v'tan, they would grind it and press it further. Zeh hayishlishi. Harishon lemenora, b'ashar lemenachos. V'chein l'zayisheni, and the same process was done for the second harvest. V'zayishlish, in the third harvest, otenu bebeis abad achilaka. They would take the olives and place it in a vat until it ripened. Umal reshagag, and then place it to the roof. V'oisoisakim in tamara, and they would dry it in the roof on a giant pile that looked like a giant date. Until its fluids flowed through it. The coins of the Beis Habad, and they would press it in a press. The Tachan Berechaim and Oisib Basalin. Shemen Yotzim Mehen Zayirishan Tam Nekar Shemen Yotzim Mehen Zasheni Parak V'Chazav V'Tam Hayashlishi Harishon L'Menoir V'Ashar L'Menachos. So far, so good. Now, Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah had slight disagreements. Remember, like he said that it shouldn't be in the basket; it should be on the side of the basket. So the Brisa brings down Rabbi Yehuda's amendments. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Correct. It means that they would wait till the top of the harvest is fully ready. Rav Yehuda says, you mentioned before that they grind it with millstones. I don't believe that. I think they would pound it with a mortar. Okay. And they would not use a beam, they would use stones. And they would not put it in the baskets, but they would put it on the sides of the basket. Okay. Now, very good. Now, just one quick point. Our Mishnah had the following line. That means that they would press it with mortar and put it in the basket. Now the problem is, if you take this brisa and you're following very clearly, this line is authored by nobody, because I'll tell you why. The Tanakama did not use the terminology of kodsho. He didn't believe that they would put it in a mortar. He felt that they would grind it toichnoi. Kodsho is the terminology of Rav Yehuda. The problem is, Rabbi Yehuda says you don't put it in the basket, you put it on the side of the basket. So you have the Tanakama who says you grind it and put it in a basket. Rabbi Yehuda says you mortar on the sides of the basket. Our Mishnah says mortar in a basket. It's not like anybody. So it says the Gemara, Hagufa Kasha, Kaitish, our Mishnah says that they would pound the olives with a mortar. And money, who said that? Rabbi Yehuda, he. But then it says Toichasal, they would place it in the basket. That's the Rabbanon, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's placed on the side of the basket. So our Mishnah that says that they would pound it with a mortar in the basket, who said that? So the answer is, you're right, it's a third opinion. Hai Tana Savar Lo Kavasa B'chada Upala Galeh B'chada. That author of our Mishnah holds like Rabbi Yehuda in one regard and holds like the Tanakam in another regard. He's a third view. You're right, Rabbi Yehuda has his shitas, the Tanakam has his shitas, and our Mishnah takes one from each. Okay. Now this next part of the Mishnah, it would probably help if we had a chart, but there were 3 harvests. There's 1, 2, and 3, and each harvest has an A, B, and C, an A quality, a B quality, and a C quality. And we said that 1, 2, and 3, the A's of each were menorah, and the B and C of each were for the Menachos. So it says the Mishnah, the following rule, the way to remember this. Harishon shebarishon, 1A is Ein Lamai Lamenu. There is nothing like 1A. The best quality of the first harvest is the top quality. There's nothing that matches it. Okay. Hasheni shebarishon, the B of the first harvest, is v'harishin shebasheni, and the A of the second harvest is shavin, are the same. Meaning the second of the first and the first of the second are the same quality. Now, just quick point. It's interesting that they're the same quality, considering one of them is used for menachos and one of them is used for the menorah. The second of the A of the first, the second of the first pressing, and the first of the second pressing are the same quality, even though one is the menorah and one is the menachos. So the Gemara is going to explain, when we say they're the same quality, doesn't mean that you use them for the same things. One is for the menorah and one is for the menachos. But if you're choosing either for the menachos, meaning what does it matter? The Rishonim are bothered by this. Who cares? Who cares which is equal to which? What's a nafkamina? Whatever. 2C is equal to CA. Like, what's the difference? Who cares? The answer is, it's regarding the menachos. You have the first one of each category, and then you have B and C of each category. So you have B and C of the first one, B and C of the second, B and C of the third. They're all used for the menachos. So you have 6 different tiers. You're in charge of the Beis HaMikdash. I show up and I say, hey, which one do you want to use for the menachos? You say, which one is this? I say, well, this is the third quality of the first pressing, or I got the third quality of the third pressing. They're all for the menachos, but which one do you use? The better quality. So you have to know which one is which for menachos purposes. So says the Mishnah, the second of the first pressing and the first of the second pressing are the same. Even though one's for the menorah, one's for the menachos, if you choose them either for the menachos, you have to know which one is which. Hashlishi shebarishon, the third oil of the first harvest, v'asheni shebasheni, and the second oil of the second harvest, v'harishin shebashlishi, and the first oil of the third harvest are shavin. They're all the same. So 3A, 2B, and 1C are all the same. Hashlishi shebasheni, the third oil of the second harvest, v'hasheni shebashlishi, shavin. The third oil of the second, so 3B and 2C are the same, and hashlishi shebashlishi in the matamenu, and 3C is the worst. Okay. Then the Mishnah says, the truth is, the highest quality oil, as we said in the Mishnah, is used for the menorah. Why? Because it says, shemen zayis zach. Zach means the clearest, the best. The truth is, the Mishnah says, I could argue that if you're going to use the best quality oil, right, if you go home, and your wife is lighting candles, not Shabbos candles, she's lighting candles, and she's using oil candles, I don't know, whatever reason. And then she's cooking. Wouldn't it make sense, cooking usually has lower quality, but wouldn't it make sense conceptually that the higher quality should be used for cooking? Because I'm eating that. What do I care what's burnt? I'm putting that in my body. I should care about what goes in my body. So it says the Mishnah, I could really make the argument that every mincha should have the highest quality of oil. Why? If the menorah, which is not consumed, requires the highest quality, then the menachos, which are going to be eaten, kavachomer should be the best quality if it's going to be consumed. Only the one that's for the ma'or, for the menorah, for the light, has the highest quality. But the menachos does not take the highest quality. All right, go to the next page. Shavin, the Gemara makes that quick point that I said before, which it said 2 of the second quality of the first harvest and the first of the second harvest are the same. The question is, what do you mean they're the same? One is used for menachos and one is used for the menorah. Shavin, ha'amr, it's rishon l'menorah v'ashan l'menachos. Amr Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my shavin l'menachos. What it means is like this. If you're using both for menachos, you have to know the quality is the same. Avada, one is for the menorah and one is for the menachos. But if you're going from a menachos perspective, if I'm using either for the mincha, you should know they're the same quality. Then the Gemara says like this: Tan Rabbanan Zach. The pasuk says that the menorah oil must be pure. Ein Zach elanaki. It means that it has to be clear. Rav Yehuda Omer Kosis. Rav Yehuda says an additional requirement that it has to be crushed. Ein Kosis elakotush. You have to crush the olives and pound them in a mortar to get out those droppings. Yachalte Zach Kosis paslo menachos. Here's the question: do you have to have the highest quality for the menachos? No. Are you allowed to use the highest quality for the menachos? Why not? But maybe it should be pasuk. The pasuk says, Shemen zayis zach kasis lama'ar. The highest quality is for the menorah. Maybe it's dafka for the menorah and not for the menachos. And if you use for the menachos, it's pasul. Im kain, I'm sorry. Tamilomer va'isaro and solas bala b'Hashem and kosus. The pasuk uses the same kosus for the menachos that menachos could use the highest quality. Im kein matam lemar el bnei achisachon. It's just Hakadosh Baruch Hu had rachmanis on us, meaning the menachos was daily, and it was a lot. It was a lot of oil, and therefore, if Hakadosh Baruch Hu would require the menorah level oil for every mincha, that would be very, very expensive. Every single time you show up for a mincha, if you need that level oil, it's very, very expensive. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, listen, I'll only require for the menorah, which was a limited amount of oil daily, as opposed to every mincha, which is no end. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying you could use the highest quality for the mincha, but we're not going to require it because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is worried about your money. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not want Klal Yisrael to just spend money unnecessarily. It's a very, very famous in the world of Chassidus. This Gemara is quoted very, very often, and that the pasuk says Eilecha v'loy li. The light of the menorah is for you, Klal Yisrael. It's not for me. Loy la'oira ani tzarech. Hashem says, I don't need this light. Meaning, don't think, and it's a strange havamina. Don't think that when you're lighting the menorah is the candelabra of the Beis Hamikdash. Don't think that Hashem is sitting in darkness and Hashem needs light to turn the lamp on. No. Hashem says the menorah is to bring spiritual light to Klal Yisrael. By the way, that's why we're all familiar with the famous miracle, the famous halacha, not a miracle, that they would have to point the candles, they would put the wicks towards the center. Now, if you're at all dealing in a room, if you concentrate the light in one area, it's not smart. You want to spread the light if you want to illuminate a room. So why does Hashem do this? The answer is because Hashem says, it's not for me. I don't need light. In Chassidus, they explain this in a much deeper way, that the purpose of Gila Shechina is not for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's for Klal Yisrael to receive the type. The point is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing this for you. And I'll prove it to you. Where in the Heichal was the menorah? When you're eating dinner, you put the lamp near the dinner table so that you could see what you're eating. Hashem has a shulchan. That kaviyachol is Hashem's meal. So the menorah should be right next to the shulchan. But it's not. It's on the opposite side of the room. What's the answer? Hashem doesn't need light for his meal. It's not for that. It's for Klal Yisrael. Shulchan b'tzafon menorah b'darum. Amr of Zikrim Rav Elazar. Loy la'achil ani tzarech. Hashem says, this light of the menorah is not to help me eat. Kaviyachol. V'loy la'oira ani tzarech. And I don't even need it for its light. It's for Klal Yisrael. That the menorah brings down the shefa of Chachma to Klal Yisrael and it's pumped out to the world. V'yasla beis chaloy nishkafim atufim. I'll prove it to you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, the windows in the Beis Hamikdash were wide and narrow. What does that mean? Tana shkufim mibachutz v'atufim mibafnim. Pashtus, the way the Samarav explains this in a tremendous arichos. The Samarav had a very he wrote a whole kuntras Keneged Rav Moshe Shita about this. He would not be happy with this. Samarav felt that the chiva mechitza is not. Rav Moshe held that you don't interact with each other talking. So a balcony helps. Even if you could see each other. The Samar Rebbe helped know that it has to be that you can't see each other. And his source is from this pasuk. The pasuk says that the windows were, if you ever seen in Eretz Yisrael, they have these windows where it goes like a V, where there's a slit and then it opens up. And the way they would do, the purpose, if you ever see it on the top of the old city walls, is they would be able to shoot arrows out. So there would be a small slit for them to shoot arrows, but not big because you don't want the arrows to come back in. Some Rav is medayik that in the Beis Hamikdash, that's how it was built. But the women were behind those windows. Now, that way he says the women could see out, but you can't see it. That was his whole diak. And Rav Moshe has a different mahalach about how it was exactly. It's a machlekes Rambam and Taisus Yamtif and the Mishnah. But Kitzer though, let's go with the Rambam and Sam Rav's approach. Why were the windows made like this? Forget about tznius. If you want light to enter the room, you don't make it thin. The answer is, the purpose is not to bring light to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem doesn't need light. He's giving light out. That's the point. The Gemara says, Tana shkuv machutz atum mefnim, loy lo'er nitzarech. Hashem says, I don't need that light. Mechutz l'pareiches ha'edus ba'il moed. The pasuk says, in more of this theme, the pasuk says, Mechutz l'pareiches ha'edus ba'il moed, outside the curtain of testimony. Meaning that the Heichel is called an Eidos. What does that mean? Eidos ilachol ba'il. This is a testimony for the entire world. Shashchina shar b'Yisrael. That the Shechina shar in Klal Yisrael. Meaning the purpose of the menorah is not light. So what is it? The answer is it's an Eidos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is shayre Shechina in Klal Yisrael. And if you think that Hashem needs the light, I'll prove it to you that He doesn't. During the 40 years in the desert, Hashem provided the light. So you think now all of a sudden when He gets to His house, now that when He's traveling and it's harder to illuminate, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the light. But now when we get to the Beis HaMikdash in Hashem's house, you think He needs our light? It's a pella. Says the Gemara, the purpose of the menorah is a edus that the Shechina is sharing in Klal Yisrael. Which component of the menorah is the edus? My edusa, Amirava Zenar Maravi, Shenois Hashem and Keneged Chavriseho, Mimena Yomadlik. We'll do the next mission also, but basically the edus is the fact that the Ner Maravi had the same amount of oil as every other candle in the menorah, but it lasted way longer, and it would last the entire morning, and they would only do the clean out the candles when that was what was done, because it lasted longer. So it was like a small Hanukkah miracle daily. That's the point. That's the edus. The edus is the fact that every single day the light of the menorah, that Ner Maravi lasted longer than the rest, was an edus that Shechina Shar in Klal Yisrael. Yes, it was the center. The Ner Maravi, the center. The Ner Maravi, the center. Yeah, the Ner Maravi, the center light. The middle of the menorah. The middle is called the Ner Maravi because it's on the west side. Now we'll do the Mishnah quickly. And we'll stop. The Mishnah says, "Me'ein ha'yu mevinas hayayin." This is a very similar Mishnah to the previous two. We talked about where to get the best oil, where to get the best flour. Now we're going to talk about where to get the best wine for the nesachim. Me'ein ha'mevinas hayayin. Where would they bring the wine from? Keduchim v'atulim alfa layayin. The best wine in Eretz Yisrael was from keduchim and atulim. Shnei lahem, the second best quality wine, was Beis Rima u Beis Lavan Bahar. Okay. Ukfar Sinna Bebika, those places. Listen, you can get wine from anywhere, but those were the best quality. Fine. You can't bring wine from a fertilized field, because as we said last time from Rashi, the fertilizing makes the wine smell a little bit, so it's not bakavadik. And you can't use it from irrigated fields, because irrigated fields didn't get enough water, so the wine was not as good quality. And not from a vineyard that has other seeds growing there, because the other seeds will sap the energy from the vineyard, so the grapes won't be so good. Vim heavy kasha, but if you bring any of them, they're kasha. Ein mavian halistoyin, you can't bring heliostoyin wine, which I think that they say that these were hung in the sun until the point where they were too sweet and they weren't as good quality. Vim heavy kasha, but the evidence is fine. Ein mavian yashan, you can't bring old wine. Divrei Rabbi. Rabbi holds you can't bring old wine. The Gemara is going to explain why. Chachamim machshir, and the Chachamim say it's fine. Ein mevin le'masuk, you can't bring sweet wine, so bar tanura is out. V'lei me'ushin, and not smoked wine. V'lei mevushal, or cooked wine, so bar tanura is still out. V'im heavy, but if you bring such wine, puzzle, it's puzzle. This is, by the way, why there were like briskers that are makbid, that when they make kiddush, they use unsweetened, no sugar added, unsweetened, non-mevushal, because it's such a concept. You want to use yayin haroy legabe hamizbeach. So this is brought down the concept. Ve'ein mavin min hadoloyoyin el min harugulyos. You can't bring wine from vines that were suspended on trellises, but rather the ones that rested on the ground. Apparently, when it's resting on the ground, it gets more nutrients and is a better quality. Umin akram ma'avudin, and only from cultivated vineyards that were plowed properly. Again, best quality. We don't take wine in large casks. Apparently, when it's in a smaller cask, it'll develop a stronger flavor as opposed to bigger casks where there's more of a chance of spoilage. And when you're filling these casks, you don't fill it fully. You want a little bit of air to let it air out, and that makes it better quality. When you're bringing this barrel, so I have this barrel and I'm bringing it to the Beis HaMikdash and I want to use it for the Nesachim, don't take the wine on top. Mipnei hakamachin, because there's mold. Apparently wine on top has mold and wine on the bottom has sediment. It has white spots on top. Don't use that wine. And you don't use the wine at the bottom because it has sediment. Elamevi mishlisha, you bring from the middle section of the barrel. Memtsa, from the center of the middle section. Now, Keitzedu Baidik, how would they do this? So here, think about this. You're pouring out, right? They didn't have you're pouring out. So the top part with the mold, you spill on the toilet, whatever, you get rid of it. Now you're up to the middle part. So you're pouring. At some point it hits the sediment, you got to stop. So what was the process? The process was, Hagizber Yoshev HaKanabiyad, the Gabbai of the Beis HaMikdash was sitting with a reed in his hand. Zarak Hagir, Hikish Bakana, the second it gets to the sediment, he would hit he would tap the guy in the hand, and the guy would stop pouring. Now, the Gemara is going to point out, why didn't he just say stop? Apparently, speaking when you're pouring wine affects the quality of the wine. So they didn't want to speak. They were silent. He tapped the guy in the hand, and then he would stop pouring. Hikesh Bekaner, Yossi Bar Yehuda has a different sheet one with this. Sheyesh by kamachim psulin. He believes that if it has mold on top, the Tanakama says just spill out into the toilet, use the rest. Rav Yosef says no, if it has mold on top, you can't use the entire barrel. Why? Because tamimim yulachem in chasam, tamim yulachem in iskayim. Tamim, it can't have a mum. The same way an animal that has a mum, the entire animal is no good. So too wine that has mold on top is like a mum, and the entire barrel is out. I will stop here.
I like that. I'm talking about it.
Yeah.